the analysts tell us that by 2020 there will be about 10 billion mobile devices deployed around the world. I'm not sure that I buy that. It seems a little bit low. How many people here have one smartphone on them? How many people here have two smartphones on them? How many people would say that they're currently carrying 3 or 4 mobile devices? Okay, we don't know what mobile devices will look like, right? We talk about smartphones today, but we may be talking about Google goggles in the future. Anyone here had laser surgery for their eyes? Yeah, I've been considering it, but I'm just wondering. So when Google goggles comes out, I'll end up putting glasses back on probably, right? So maybe I should hold off. So if we take a look at the changing landscape, let's roll it back a little bit first. Let's go back 15 years ago. 15 years ago, what was the mobile device that people were using for business? Any ideas? Palm Pilots? Anyone remember the Palm Pilot? Yeah? If we go back 7 years ago, okay, before the iPhone, before the iPad, could we have envisioned that today, could we have envisioned that my son last night would have stayed up late in order to watch an Apple press conference where they're describing the new phone that's going to come out? Who would have imagined these types of things? So we don't know where things are going. We know where they've come, and we want to be prepared for that future. IBM in January acquired a company, a platform called Worklight. And Worklight is a platform to help us to develop those mobile applications in order to develop for the mobility of the future. The vision of Worklight was to provide an open platform that will enable us to continue to develop mobile devices across platforms, across different brands, focusing on new operating systems, and be able to continue to adopt and adapt into the future. We wanted to provide something that would enable you to manage the entire life cycle of your mobile application. So something that enables you to start with the development of the application, the deployment and management of the application, and also take into account what's going to happen when you need to take applications off the market as things change and evolve. So we're really providing an end-to-end solution. Okay? There we go. So Worklight provides a few different components in order to do so. We have a studio so that your developers can develop the actual apps. Worklight Studio is delivered as an Eclipse plugin. So if your developers are already using Eclipse, they don't have to learn a new tool. We're providing a Worklight server in order to provide some basic integration and be able to check to make sure that the application that's deployed on a device is the most recent version. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. There are runtime components. So across multiple different devices, there are parts that will be common across all devices. And there's also runtime components that will be specific to the device that you're deploying on. And in that instance, you can also take into account things like security and authentication, things of that nature. And we also provide a console to enable you to understand what's going on with the applications that are deployed. How many people are using the different versions of my applications? What happens when I, be able to send out messages when I need to have people update the application or something of that nature? So as we see here, we have the architecture of the studio where we're developing. Okay, with the studio where we're developing, we're deploying the applications across multiple platforms to the devices themselves. deploying information and those applications out to the servers with a console that's monitoring. And we're going to get into each of these. Now, when we're developing mobile apps, we have a couple of different strategies we can take. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. What a lot of organizations are doing today is they're developing native apps, right? So they're either going to boutique firms or they're hiring staff. And I'm sure that a lot of you have developers that are iOS developers and Android developers. And native apps have a lot of advantages. Because a native app, I have a lot of control over what's going on with the app. I can leverage all the different features of the mobile device, whether it's the phone, the camera, the GPS, the accelerometer, right? I can leverage all these types of things. And I can end up with a really robust and beautiful interface. And it's important for us to have robust and really compelling interfaces because our competition is Angry Birds. How many people here have played Angry Birds? Yeah? Okay. That's our competition. Okay? You know, when we look back to our enterprise systems over the past 10, 15 years, enterprise systems didn't necessarily need to be really nice because we had to use them to get our work done. But today, the competition on that same mobile device is Angry Birds, is TripIt, right? Is all these applications that people are using. So building a native app is really compelling. The challenge with native apps is that I need to develop for each platform individually. So let's say I'm building a native app for hotel bookings. So I've built my iOS app. Maybe it takes me 3 or 4 months. I end up releasing my Android app. I used to have a BlackBerry app, but you know, now what's going on? Who's using BlackBerry? Well, in Indonesia, there's a lot of people using BlackBerries. So things work really well with my iOS app, but that same process on the Android app might not be working at all. It might be a broken process. Because I'm developing everything individually. And each time that I redevelop that same functionality, there's of course the opportunity that there are going to be some bugs. Now, I know none of the organizations here develop anything with bugs in them, but some organizations outside of this room might do so. And so that's a risk that we're taking. Another option that we have is we can go with web apps. Okay, so apps that simply are using, say, HTML5 and CSS and JavaScript and live within the browser of the device. And we can do some compelling things there, and they can be really nice. Challenge that we have is that, one of the challenges we have is we can only live within the browser itself. We can't get outside to that other functionality. Another challenge we have is that when we're doing those types of apps, we have to be online. Now, for a lot of types of apps, being online is maybe okay. But what if I'm developing an app for a utility company because I want to enable their meter readers to be able to update the meter readings from a mobile device? What happens when they go into the basement of a high-rise apartment building and they lose connectivity? Are they going to take a piece of paper and they'll jot everything down or whatever, and then they'll go upstairs and they'll sort of put it in the device? We don't want that sort of situation either. A great alternative to that, hybrid apps. So apps where part of the app is native and part of the app is using the HTML5, the JavaScript, the CSS. So part of the app is using those types of, that type of functionality, browser functionality, but it looks like an app. I can take advantage of the full device, right? So I can take advantage of the phone and the camera and the GPS and all these other parts of the device. And it's great, except that even when I'm doing hybrid apps, and if you take out and you talk to your customers and talk to the people that are developing mobile apps within your organization for your customers, even when I'm developing those hybrid apps, what's typically happening is that I'm still developing them in silos. right? I have my team that's doing a hybrid app, but they're doing the Android, and they're doing the iOS, and they're doing the BlackBerry. And if Microsoft gets their act together, then you know, pretty soon, probably we'll see some Microsoft stuff out there too with the Surface tablets and whatnot. So Worklight takes another approach, which is to sort of combine all of these things. But before we get to combining, beyond hybrid, we can also do specific shells. And this is what one of our customers is doing. Okay, so we're having a common shell across the different platforms where we can enable or disable different parts of the functionality. So I can have that hybrid. Maybe I don't want to give the developers who are developing my apps the ability to use the camera. Let's say I'm developing apps for a military organization. Okay? I live in Singapore. In Singapore, people that are doing their national service, their army duty, okay, they aren't allowed to have phones or bring phones into the bases that have cameras. So what if I want to develop apps and, you know, for a military organization, I probably want to make sure that even if people are bringing their own devices in, I disable the camera, I disable different things. So let's go back to the architecture and focus on the different components. So Worklight Studio. Worklight Studio is delivered as a plugin for Eclipse. So all of the developers that you have that are used to using Eclipse for their development, they continue to use Eclipse. They don't have a new tool to learn. They don't have to go out and learn, you know, something proprietary. They're used to using Eclipse, keep working in Eclipse. We're combining native technologies with standard web development. So a lot of times what we see in mobile application development environments is that you have to write in some proprietary language, and then what you've done gets transcoded and turned into a mobile app. What we're doing is enabling your developers to focus on writing the actual code that's going to end up being on the device. So whether that's the HTML5 and JavaScript and CSS3, or whether it's the native iOS and Android and these types of codes. Okay? So they're writing in those standard codes. They don't have to learn another language, another paradigm for development. We're also enabling the plug-in of many third-party libraries and components. So for instance, a very common and popular component to build your mobile apps is something that used to be called PhoneGap. Now it's called Cordova. And a lot of organizations say, well, you know what, I can just go out with some HTML5, some PhoneGap, and I build something. And that works for that first generation. But over time, you need to start to manage this in a more coherent way. But we enable you to plug in and leverage PhoneGap. We're leveraging PhoneGap in order to get to a lot of the different components of a device from the HTML components. Okay, there are other libraries. There's jQuery, there's Senza, there's all sorts of organizations that are coming out with really interesting components to help you build your mobile apps. Well, it's great. You're working within Worklight, you can plug these things in. In addition to that, we see customers that, for instance, say, I want to build sort of an ecosystem around developers who are going to develop for my customers. But in order to do so, I want to be able to take into account some of this authentication, security, authorization, these types of things. Maybe I want to be able to give those developers access to my customer database or my employee database. So I can develop sort of an SDK, plug that into Worklight so that everyone within my organization that is going to be developing apps for my organization or for my customers can leverage those because I'm just plugging it into that environment, okay, that standard development environment. In addition to that, within the Worklight Studio, you can also develop the back-end connectivity. So we're going to talk in a minute about the Worklight server, okay, but I use that same studio to develop the adapters and the connectivity to integrate to other systems, to the back-end systems. So if I'm doing some more lightweight integration, I can just go with that. If I need something more robust, I can go with, for instance, IBM's Mobile Foundation, which includes Worklight and cast iron. So I have some more robust integration capabilities. So as I mentioned, it's delivered as an Eclipse plugin, so just keep working within Eclipse. And when you initialize a project within Worklight, we ask you something very simple. What platforms are you going to be deploying on? iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, Windows? As additional platforms are coming out, we can include additional platforms. But we think it's very, very important for us to be developing in a centralized place for all these different platforms. And this will also enable us to deploy on more platforms than we would be able to deploy otherwise. How many people are using iOS devices? Okay, how many people are using Android devices? Okay, what does an Android device mean? Android is sort of a misnomer. In a survey of 1 million random Android devices, can anyone guess how many different flavors of Android they found on a random sampling of 1 million devices? Anyone? 4,000. 4,000. I'm not sure about in India. In China, for instance, they're replacing, the sort of Nokia Symbian, simple phones. In Korea and China, you're seeing a lot of dumb phones that are running Android. They're not smartphones. They're not using, they don't have the functionality of a Samsung Tab. There's very basic phones, but they're running Android. So there's a lot of different things out there. As this changes, as additional platforms come out, we're going to need to take into account more and more platforms. Google Goggles, Samsung's, what did they come out with? It was Badoo, right? Maybe they'll continue to grow that. We don't know where things are going to go. So once you've initialized your project and you've decided which, whether it's mobile phones, desktop widgets perhaps, right? Different things that are using, say, HTML5. Maybe it's a Facebook component. We then build out a structure for you, which includes a common area. So in your common area, you're going to put that common HTML5, your CSS, your JavaScript, and see your app in a simulator. You can connect your a phone, to your workstation, and be able to immediately see what the app is going to look like. And then we also provide an internal app store so that you can get other people to take a look at that app and see how things are going. And potentially then also use that for internal enterprise deployment. As I mentioned earlier, we're integrating best-in-class tools. So PhoneGap, now Cordova, is extremely popular. You don't stop using that because you're going to be managing your development within Worklight. You don't need to stop using jQuery and Dojo and all of these things. We continue to leverage these, but we want to do so in a managed way. Centralizing the build, you can have multiple teams contributing into that same application, right? Continuing into that same Eclipse, continuing to contribute into that same Worklight project. Now, the runtime architecture, once we have the app, we're deploying that architecture onto the Worklight server. And the Worklight server has a number of different components. So one thing we're doing with the Worklight server is we have server-side application code that you can leverage to go out and gather information from your other backend systems. Once you bring that information to the Worklight server, you can then perform a mashup and do some adjusting and massaging of that information so that you're only sending out to the mobile device the information that is needed for that particular action. Right? We have to remember to be good citizens. We don't have unlimited bandwidth, right, out to the mobile devices. We don't have unlimited battery power out to the mobile devices. We want to make things as lean as possible. Okay? You can also take care of things, for instance, authentication. So one of our customers is a large global electronics firm, and they wanted to, their plan is to develop a couple of hundred apps for their internal business use. in order to do so, they needed to be able to authenticate using Kerberos. Right? That's the scheme they use. Android doesn't have Kerberos. iOS doesn't have Kerberos. But between the Worklight wrapper and the Worklight server, we were able to provide a framework to be able to include Kerberos and other authentication schemes. So you're going to do authentication also using the server. Adapter libraries. Okay, so if you're doing basic XML-based integration, what we provide is great. If you're doing something that's more robust, you bring in something like cast iron. So data collection, we've heard a lot about big data, a lot about all the information that's being collected. So another thing that we're providing is the ability to be able to pull information about what people are doing with the app on the device. I want to be able to understand, our customers want to be able to understand what functionality is being used in those different mobile devices and the applications that they've deployed. And by understanding that, they can then better understand where to invest their development. Okay? If we go back to a hotel booking system, okay, if I see that a lot of people are just checking the reservations rather than booking, then maybe I want to make that functionality more robust. I want to see how to continue to increase and enhance that rather than the booking. Or maybe it's a problem that the booking system, the way that I'm doing booking, the flow isn't very good. I want to invest there. So I can collect a lot of this information and see how they're using it. I can collect the information of how often people are using the applications, and then take all of that, bring that into some rudimentary, some basic analytics within the Worklight platform in the monitoring. Or I can then take that, of course, into all of my larger data analytics systems. Another thing we're doing from the server is direct updates. So in order to deploy an app, for instance, on an iOS device, I have to send it off to Apple, right? They have a process that can take a week to 10 days to go through and understand whether you're doing anything that sort of violates their terms and conditions, anything that would compromise their security paradigm, things of that nature. And the same thing with Google and other players where you're deploying things into their app stores. So if I have deployed an app and I find that there's a bug or I want to enhance my app, the time to market can be pretty long. Right? It's going to take me a week to 10 days in order to get that app actually out into the hands of the consumers. So one of the things that we're doing here is direct update. So direct update, I download the app from the App Store, and with the app, it's a hybrid app. So I have some native code, and I have also the HTML5 and the web code. That is deployed on the device. Every time that I open the app or I bring the app forward, we're checking with the WebSphere server to see whether I have the most up-to-date version of the app and the most up-to-date version of those web components. And if we don't have the most up-to-date version, we can do a few things. It could be that we just want to note that and we want to tell the user that please update your application at a specific time in the future. Or it could be we can force them to do it right now. But as long as we are updating just those web components, we have no need to send the user back to the App Store. We don't need to get Apple or Google or anyone to sign off to say this app is approved. Because all we're doing is we're downloading those web components back into the cache on the device, opening them up, and they start to use those components right away. Okay, so that's direct update, which can speed our time to market and enable us a lot more flexibility. We also are providing a unified push notification architecture. You don't want your developers to have to learn the different paradigms for sending push notifications out to all the different users for different devices. So the idea is that your developer simply says, I need to send a push notification when I've checked a certain scenario and something happened. Okay? So if I'm if I have an app for an airline and we know this flight is delayed, I want to send out a push notification to all of those people who are using my mobile app that have reservations that are booked on that flight. I want to send them out a push notification and say your flight is delayed by 2 hours. Better than that, I want to take into account and say your flight is delayed by 2 hours. I know that you're not at the airport now, so here's a coupon to stop at your local Starbucks. Or I know you are at the airport, so here's a coupon that enables you to get into the lounge, the airline's lounge today. But I don't want to have my developers figure out the different ways to send push notifications. So the Worklight server takes care of that. We tell the Worklight server we want to send the push notification, and it already knows how to, we already know how to translate for the different, for iOS and for Google. Recently, Google just changed the way they do push notifications. Developers using Worklight don't need to care about that because all they're doing is saying, send out a push notification. Right? Worklight took care of understanding the changes and the difference in the format to be able to send that out. There's a lot of security challenges. As we move into bring your own device, the security challenges are just going to get greater. Some of the security challenges we see, for instance, are being able to protect the data that's on the device. So how many people here have either jailbroken their iOS devices or rooted their Android devices? Anyone? Okay. And how many of you that have done that are using your devices to check your bank account information? Anyone? Yeah? Okay, very good. So once you've done that, of course, the issue is that people can write applications that sit on that device that can be sniffing the data, sniffing information, accessing information that you didn't necessarily, want them to be accessing. Enforcing security updates. Okay, how do we make sure that our employees and our consumers are using the latest version of the app? How do we enforce them to update the app? Streamlining corporate security approval process. So in many organizations, just like how we have to send our apps to say Apple to be approved, what about when we're deploying things internally to our own enterprises or your customer's enterprise? Don't those apps also need to be vetted for security to make sure that someone's not taking confidential information and sending it out to someplace outside the network, things of that nature? Authentication and authorization we talked about a little bit. We need to make sure that the authentication authorization is suited to our specific organization's policies. And then, of course, there's simple, hacking. The first thing we want to do is be able to enable all of our developers to be able to check that very easily. And once I've checked that, I then have to figure out what I'm going to do about it. Maybe I do nothing about it. So let's say I'm a bank, and I have customers who are rooting their Android phones and jailbreaking their iOS phones. Do I enable them to continue to use my banking app to check their balances? Would any of us be happy to have our bank tell us that because we rooted our Android device, we're not allowed to check our balances anymore? I don't think so. But as a bank, I probably have some feeling of responsibility over the data, right? And even though the customer may be responsible if something happens, I'm going to end up spending a lot of resources cleaning up the mess. So once I've determined, for instance, that the iPhone has been jailbroken, maybe I change on the fly. I change the way that I deal with security. So on a standard device, I enable them to go ahead and enter their password on the device. Now, once they have, I live in Singapore. In Singapore, everything is with one-time passwords. It's two-factor authentication stuff. So I can never just put in my password. Typically, what happens, even if I'm on the internet with my laptop, I want to check my account. I have to then take an SMS, get a number that I get, one-time password SMS, key that in as well. where does that SMS typically go? To my mobile phone. So if I'm checking my balance on my mobile phone, which I have just jailbroken, that means that someone could potentially have an app that is actually also sniffing out that SMS message and using that information. So maybe once I've identified that, maybe then what I need to do is I need to use one-time, the security tokens, Vasco types of tokens. Okay, so the idea here is that with Worklight, we want to enable you to discover these things and then figure out ways to implement changes to the process of your customers so they can take these into account. Enforcing security updates we saw earlier with the idea that I can disable an app because I'm checking to see whether we have the same version, things of that nature. With the Worklight, building a shell around your apps, taking care of security and things within that shell, I can then enable my customers to much quicker deploy many more apps without a long approval process and things of that nature. Okay, we also have within the IBM family of products, we have something called App Scan. So we can do we can take a look at, for instance, some mobile apps and understand whether or not there appear to be any sort of security breaches and things like that. So we can send our app development out to a boutique firm. We can get a couple of, our customers, they can get a couple of kids from the local college who learned how to, some Xcode and how to develop some iOS apps. But we really want to be talking to our customers about how all of these sorts of, the security and the management and all of these things are crucial to them, and for that they really need to take into account a robust platform. So we've talked about the Worklight Studio, the Worklight Server, the runtime components. The Worklight Console enables us to get some basic statistics and gather information about how people are using the apps, so we can then take that, put that into a more robust data analytics solution. Now let's talk a bit about how some of our customers are using Worklight. So one of our customers is Lotte Credit Card in Korea. And the Korean market for the longest time, smartphones weren't very popular. And as they became popular, and Samsung was coming out with these Android phones, they changed some regulations which enabled Apple to really come into the market in a strong way. So Lotte had developed an Android application. Their application is pretty robust. Over 100 different screens of functionality that you can be using on their application. They're enabling you, for instance, to use augmented reality. So you can say, you know what, I need to find an ATM. So it's not just a map, a Google map showing you this is where you can find an ATM. You can take that device, hold it up using the camera, and it'll guide you and show you where the ATM is. And meanwhile, it's showing you, in that picture, showing you the different places that have ATMs. Oh, there's a 7-Eleven, there's this, as you're moving the phone. But it was Android, and it was hybrid, so it wasn't all native. And they needed to quickly get an iOS app out there. So Lotte were able to import that app that they built, import the project they built into Worklight, and within a matter of a few weeks, take that and put out essentially the same app for iOS devices. So they were able to leverage what they'd already done on one platform, bring it across and develop it and deploy it on another platform. Today, the Lotte application has about 1 million downloads in Korea. So 1 million people are checking their loyalty information with the Lotte credit card, what sales and bonuses they can get by using the credit card, finding places to use the credit card with this app that was developed using the Worklight platform. Another example is ING Direct. So ING Direct in the US is a bank that has no branches. And for years, you've been able to go online and do all your banking through your web browser. And you can even scan a check and upload it to their website, and that's depositing a check. So you don't even have to put it in an envelope and send it off. So ING wanted to see how they can leverage the investment they've already made in their website and repurpose that for their mobile application. So by building a hybrid app, they're able to reuse a lot of that functionality, and that really interesting way to deposit a check. Does anyone have a checkbook on them? Anyone? Write me a check. Okay. So what you do with your mobile phone, with the way they've repurposed it, I take a picture of the front of the check with my mobile phone. They ask me then to turn the check over, take a picture of the back of the check with my mobile phone. I enter a few pieces of information, right? The amount of the check, things like that, just so they can sort of validate to make sure that what they're scanning and interpreting is correct. Click the button, I've just deposited a check. They then ask me to please dispose of the check, and you're done. So they're moving more and more of the banking functions into the phone, even depositing a physical check. And this is something that they were able to do because platforms like Worklight are able to help them to repurpose that information. Through style sheets, I can take the same investment that they've made in their website and repurpose those pages so you can use it on the mobile device as well. Now, banking is really big, right? We think about telcos, media companies. What about more traditional organizations? So one of our customers is a company called TBC Corporation, and let's hear a little bit about what they're doing. And they're in a little bit different sort of a space than banking and telcos and media.
TBC Corporation is one of the nation's leaders in automotive service and certainly the largest vertically integrated tire organization in the country, manufacturing and distributing tires to our wholesale clients as well as our retail brands.
Today we're a $3.6 billion corporation, #1 retailer with over 4,000 locations in North America and 13 countries. About 5 years ago we established a technology strategy roadmap, and wherein we wanted to shift from tires to service. And so everything from our technology to our acquisition strategy and our talent development was really centered around that strategy. We realized that we needed to reinvent ourselves, and we needed to transform not only our technology and the way we sold, but also interaction with the consumer. We wanted to create this air of transparency, trust, and confidence in our automotive services and our products.
The trust that we expect to engage our customers with requires consistency across touch points. We're using technology to assist us in the development of that trust and that harmony, specifically with the development of custom point-of-sale applications that allow our retail associates to have a common experience with customers.
And so what we want to do is completely change that experience, remove those barriers, and create an environment and an application that had this kind of consistent, what we call a connected experience from the web all the way into the store.
Mobility is key to our strategy for connected customer experience across all channels. We've spent a considerable amount of time with our customers understanding how they'd like to use devices and what we can provide through a mobile experience to make their lives easier, better, faster around their automotive services. And we selected the Worklight product specifically to deliver on the experiences that we've designed as a result of that research. Our mobile application portfolio requires complete flexibility of the UI so that we can address customer needs and our user experience with complete and total control. And the Worklight platform allows us to manage that through standard web development technologies like HTML5 and CSS3. That gives us complete control of the application and the customer experience, and that's incredibly important to us. The development of a consistent user experience regardless of device is very challenging. Unless you have a product that truly can manage a single code base and push it to different devices consistently in a way that preserves the integrity of the user experience. And Worklight provides that.
We're already seeing anywhere between a 10 to 15% jump in our retail sales through this new kind of transparent relationship with our consumers.
About 3.5 years ago, we had 15 to 20% of our visitors to our web properties coming through mobile devices. Today, that's closer to 40%, and that continues to grow every single month. We are embracing the socialization of marketing and customer experience in a way that allows us to create trust with customers by listening and participating in the experience of maintaining a vehicle in a way that doesn't feel like sales, because it isn't.
This transformation for us was about reinventing the consumer experience, reinventing how the automotive aftermarket industry vertical delivers services and products. It was driven from the top down, from a strategic vision of transforming our business with the hope, the wish, the desire to see increased profitability and revenue generation. If I look at, this journey, and it really is a journey, there isn't a destination point. This is going to be an evolving and continual process. But if you understand where you're going, and you plan, and you staff, and you partner appropriately, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to hit success.
So as he said, it's a journey. Okay, and as such, it's a journey that we're all in together. And we would ensure that our customers have the ability to deploy quickly across many different devices, and it's future-proof, so that we can continue as additional mobile paradigms, mobile devices come out. We have the ability to quickly develop in a managed way and deliver to our customers the value that they're coming to us all for. So the last thing I'd like to touch on, the Worklight development environment, completely free. All of your developers can download it tomorrow, still time this afternoon, start to work with it, and only when it comes time to be deploying in production is there a license component to take into account. So I would say ask the people that are dealing with your mobile development to download the platform, start to work with it, and from there we can go on. In the Solution Center outside, there's a demo of Worklight. I invite you all to come in and see how it works, and let's continue to discuss how we can work together to sit on top of this tidal wave of mobility, which is taking the world. Thank you very much.